Good afternoon and welcome to our Covenant presentation for July. Earlier this year we looked at lives of various Schoenstatt members in our history and tried to discern how they are examples for us and letters of recommendation, letters from our Father and Founder and letters from God. Over the last two Covenant Sundays we more closely examined some aspects of Father Kentenich's life and again looked for pointers in them as letters of recommendation for us. On July the 8th, 1910, 8 new priests were ordained in the house chapel of the Palatines Mission House in Limburg. The youngest of them, not yet 25 years of age, was Joseph Kentenich. So for this month of July, we'll walk through some hurdles in Father's early life and journey leading up to his ordination. Now just some background before we go on. Joseph's parents never married. After Joseph's birth, he and his mother lived with her parents in the small village of Gimnich. His life in his grandparents' home instilled in him a love of freedom. His mother and grandmother were his first educators, his first teachers in his Catholic faith. After his grandfather died, it became more difficult to make ends meet, and eventually Katerina had to find employment away from the family home. That brings us to the first hurdle I will mention today, and that occurred in 1894 when young Joseph was 8.5 years old. His mother, Katerina, was no longer able to care for him, and the decision was made to place him in St Vincent's orphanage. We all know the story well, how Katerina placed a chain and cross, which were a memento of a First Holy Communion, around the neck of a statue of the Blessed Mother. With this act, she made a fervent petition: raise and educate my child. From now on, you be his mother. Fulfil in my place the duties I have as his mother. The sadness and pain he felt over the separation made him keenly aware of this consecration. It had a deep, lasting impact on his soul and stayed with him throughout his entire life. He became a child of Mary. Joseph recognised that Mary accepted him completely as his mother and educator. From then on, she decisively influenced his image of God. The second hurdle reflects on the thinking at the beginning of the 20th century regarding suitability of applicants for the priesthood. From a very early age, young Joseph expressed the thought that he had a calling to be a priest one day. Even though his grades were very good at St Vincent's, his birth status, the fact that his parents were not married, prevented him from becoming a diocesan seminarian. However, according to church law, solemn profession in a religious order was considered to be like a spiritual rebirth which resolved any defects in the natural birth. Father Savills, who had been instrumental in finding the place at the orphanage, was able to make the connection for Joseph with the Palatines for a place at their minor seminary. On September 23rd in 1899, Father Savills accompanied Joseph, 2 months short of his 14th birthday, to his new home at the seminary just below the famous Rhine fortress at Ehrenbreitstein. Joseph's life was taking him to the vicinity of Koblenz. He could not know that his life's work would be inseparable from a little valley just a few miles away. Schoenstatt. Father Savills provided an open door and an opportunity for young Joseph to possibly reach his calling. The third hurdle refers to young Joseph's drive for the truth. On September 24, 1904, Joseph was received into the Palatine novitiate in Limburg. He was invested with the Palatine habit and now addressed as frater, the Latin word for brother. Outwardly, Frater Kentenich seemed like all the others. However, inwardly he was in turmoil. Father Kentenich later recalled that he thought he could not reach out or discuss his concerns with any friend or spiritual mentor. He was all alone in the grips of an intense interior struggle. He was experiencing a crisis of faith along with his search for the truth. What was going on in the young novice? We can suppose that the collision of worlds, the rigid formalism of his novitiate versus his deep drive for freedom, played a significant role in precipitating inner crisis. Add to it the uncertainty of trying to find your place as a teenager. Was the problem really the outward circumstances? Or was it just me? Young Joseph was also beginning to understand what was affecting the church and the world at the time, which he later called mechanistic thinking. During this time, he turned to the lives of various saints who were known to have a deep Marian devotion for inspiration. He also further developed his understanding and recognition of Mary's place in the church and strengthened his love for our Blessed Mother. Father Kentenich would later reflect that if I had not gone through this totally abnormal development, I could not have been what I should and strive to be as a priest. Father Kentenich later saw his struggles as a youth in a providential light, discovering how it helped give him a particular empathy for those struggling with interior compulsion or urges. He thought these struggles could be eased and resolved through humble acceptance and cultivation of a greater attitude of childlikeness. The final hurdle I will mention today reached its climax just before his final profession. After many years of ill health, often dealing with severe headaches and also being diagnosed with tuberculosis, both of which had led the Provincial Council to have serious reservations about admitting Frater Kentenich to second profession, the time came for Joseph to be considered for final profession. Because of his poor health and the fact that he often challenged the current philosophical and theological teachings at the time, it became apparent that the decision would not necessarily be smooth sailing. In July 1909, the Provincial Council of the Palatines held the vote to decide on the admission to final profession. Unfortunately, the vote went against Frater Kentenich. Father Kolb, the provincial superior at the time, wrote in his memoirs, "The next day I had the frater come to my room. 'Did you already hear the result of the consultation?' The short answer was, 'Yes.' 'What do you have to say about it?' 'God's will.' 'What are you thinking of doing?' 'First, finish my high school diploma.' There he stood before me, gaunt, pale and sickly. Nonetheless, he stood there in calm control. Later that month, a second vote was taken and the previous decision was overturned, and Joseph was accepted for final profession. So, while these hurdles were not the only ones, nor the most important ones that young Joseph faced in his early journey, we can reflect on them and identify themes which are important within the Schoenstatt movement. Over the first hurdle, young Joseph recognised the importance of his Marian consecration. Over the second hurdle, Joseph was shown an open door and given the opportunity to reach his calling. Over the third hurdle, Joseph began to recognise mechanistic and organic thinking and the importance of childlikeness. Over the last hurdle, Joseph acknowledged God's plan and divine providence. All of these points became instrumental in forming the young priest and later the Schoenstatt movement. In closing, I would like to read a quote which Shirley Hall mentioned in her presentation for the National Conference at the beginning of the year. For hundreds of years, the Church has experienced and therefore teaches that a close spiritual connection with the person of the founder and faithfulness to his mission, a faithfulness which, however, is always attentive to the signs of the times, is the source of vitality and life for the foundation and for the whole people of God. You have been called to share in the grace given to your founder and to offer it to the whole Church. That came from Pope John Paul II. To put this another way, our task is to now discover or reaffirm our founder's mission and to become his letters of recommendation for the Church of today. Thank you, and I wish you many Covenant Day blessings. For those interested in delving further into Father Kentenich's early life, I used two books as my references for this article. The first is The Hidden Years, and the second is Brushstrokes of the Father, Volume 1. You may now like to discuss with each other the following questions. 1. How can the overcoming of these hurdles in Father Kentenich's life be letters of recommendation for us? 2. How did these hurdles help develop the formation of the movement we know today? 3. Describe how overcoming these hurdles can reflect gifts of the Holy Spirit bestowed on Father Kentenich. And 4. How does Father's charism guide us to become letters of recommendation? And for those wishing for a personal reflection, as I look back on hurdles and obstacles in my life, can I see the hand of God guiding and helping me overcome them?